You're trying to work it out, huh? Knowledge can only bring us so far. And while knowledge is important, it can actually distract us from the more important things. Am I right? And so what God was saying to Adam and Eve, avoid that. Don't even go there. But once he told them that, our human condition is what? Think of your children. Think of yourselves when you were younger, huh? How many times you got in trouble because they told you not to do it? And once they told you not to do it, there it is, okay? That's our story. The Adam and Eve story is our story. It is your story and my story. So, they saw the tree. They went towards the tree. But they didn't eat of the fruit at first. Why didn't they?
They're afraid.
They were afraid. What were they afraid of? What did God tell them? If you touch it, if you told them that they were to touch it, what would happen? They would die. But we're told at the very beginning of the book of Genesis, the third chapter of the book of Genesis, that the serpent was also in the garden. The devil in the guise of a serpent, right? The serpent was also in the garden. And that the serpent was more cunning than every other animal in the garden. In other words, the serpent was more cunning than Adam and Eve. Which is another way of saying that the serpent, the devil, knew Eve and Adam better than Eve and Adam knew themselves. So they're at the tree, the serpent speaks to them. At first they resisted. He asked them why, and they said, because God told us if we even touch this tree, the fruit of this tree, that we would die. What did the serpent do? Rather, what did he say to them to get them to change their minds? What did he say? Who remembers? You will be like God. You will be like God. Think again about your lives. I know I can think about my life. Think about how many times we wanted to be our own God. Now we might not have used that word, but our actions and our word and our actions reflect that belief. How many times have you thought, you know, if they would only let me do it my way? Okay? How many husbands have thought, if she would only leave me alone to do it my way? How many wives have said to their husbands, if you'd only listen to me and do it my way, we wouldn't be in the trouble we're in today. Am I there? I mean, am I there? Right? Again, think of your children. Now, we might not say that, might not use those words, but in reality, we want to be our own God. We don't want people telling us what to do unless we ask them for the help. So, again, I can't help but look at this without looking at it through the eyes of how I was raised in the church. So, as a young Catholic, but that's what the way I was taught was that Adam and Eve's sin was a sin of pride. The sin of pride, that they thought that they could be God. And while that is true, there might be something else involved in this too, and I can't help but look at this through the lenses of my experiences having studied psychology. Think of your lives. In the quiet of the night, if you wake up worrying about things, and most of us do after a certain age, and you can't get away from that worry, what if someone could offer you something, again, something magical, that would take all your worries away? What if someone said to you, if you were to eat of the fruit of this tree, you'd never have to worry about your children again. You'd never have to worry about your grandchildren again, because this tree would give you the knowledge where you could handle the future. You'd know the future ahead of time. How many choices would you have made differently if you knew the future? Hands should go up, huh? How many choices would we make for our children if we knew that we could help them not make that mistake? That wouldn't be a selfish thing. How many of you, as parents, worry about your kids? Yeah. I'm talking about your grown kids. How many of you, as parents, worry about what your kids are doing with your grandkids? Lord have mercy, huh? So, maybe it wasn't just selfishness and pride on Adam and Eve's part. Remember, the serpent was the most cunning animal in the garden. Maybe the devil figured, hey, I know they worry about things. Let me tell them, by eating the fruit of this tree, I can take away that worry. And Adam and Eve thought, okay, we won't even have to bother God. We can do this on our own. And don't we like to do it on our own? We only ask my way, exactly. We only ask for help when we realize we can't do it on our own. And even then, sometimes we don't want to ask. Am I right? So, look at the Adam and Eve story from this perspective. Yes, Adam and Eve responded to the devil because of pride. They wanted to be their own God. But is it not possible that they also responded to the devil because they were afraid and they were worried, and he offered them a way of getting away from the worry and the fear? If they could get knowledge, that knowledge would prevent them from worrying, from being afraid. So maybe that has something to do with them also choosing to eat of the fruit. We don't always do things for one reason. Am I right? We do things for more than one reason. Sometimes we do things for, we think we know why we're doing it. We think we're doing it for this reason, and when we think about it later on, we go, oh my gosh, I did it for that reason. We don't always know that as human beings. So they ate of the fruit of the tree. What happened? Did they gain knowledge? Say yes. Yes. But what was the knowledge they gained? They were naked. That they were naked. They became ashamed. They became afraid. And as a result, what did they try to do? Hide. Cover themselves and hide. As if you could hide from God. And so we're told that later on in the evening, as God was walking through the garden looking for Adam and Eve, he saw them, and he said to Adam, and I think this tells us so much about our God. If someone hurts us, someone hurts you, someone hurts me, what's the question that we normally ask? Why? We ask, why? Why did you do this to me? What did I do to you might be the question. But it's a why question more often than not, right? What did God ask him? Did God ask Adam why? What did he say? He said, who told you you were naked? Think about that, you guys. That is a profound example of who our God is. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. We would all ask why. God asked, who told you you were naked? In other words, who blew it for you? We have anyone here under the age of 20? Good. So, I don't want to mess it up for you. So, look at it this way. It's like when you first found out that there wasn't a Santa Claus. I remember when I first found out that there isn't a Santa Claus. You guys are cool with that, right? Okay, so when you first found out there wasn't a Santa Claus, I was really hurt. You know, because it really, I liked believing that there was a Santa Claus, okay? And one of my older cousins told me, and I couldn't wait, I'm the eldest of my family, I could not wait to go back and blow it for my younger brother and sister once I found out. But that's where that question is coming from. God is saying, God is not angry, God is what in that question? Hurt. Who's he hurt for? Adam and Eve. He says, who told you you were naked? Who blew it for you? Who messed it up for you? Who told you that there's no Santa Claus? Who did that? Who destroyed your innocence? God was hurt. Not because they hurt him. God was hurt because they were now hurt. That's who our God is. God did not get upset with Adam and Eve out of anger. God got upset because they had hurt themselves. And when we hurt ourselves, who do we hurt? Our God. You got to, I know some of you have worked that through, and Crecile helps us work that through. That's important to stay with that. We don't hurt God without hurting ourselves. It's hurting ourselves that hurts God. And that's going to be important because we're going to talk about sin later on. Okay, so they're in the garden. God said, avoid the tree. They didn't listen. They ate of the tree. They discovered their shame. They lost their innocence. They separated not only from God. Who else did they separate from? What did Adam say to God about Eve? Yeah. Oh, he said more than that. He said, the woman you gave me caused me to sin. Who did he blame it on? God. He blamed it on God too. Men are accused of denial. Denial. Now, as a man, I'm just saying, blame it on Adam. I mean, blame it on Adam. This dude did not only blame his woman, he blamed God. When you think about it, the woman you gave me, it's your fault. I'm choosing this woman, and she caused me to sin. Amen? Amen. So when I say to my kids, my older kids, not my younger ones, I'll say, you can be sure of this. Adam and Eve didn't sleep together that night. Huh? When Eve got through with him, huh? There was no Cain or Abel being born that night, huh? Sin causes us to separate not only from our God, but from each other. From each other. We're told that that's how sin came into the world. How many of you were taught that? That sin came into the world through Adam and Eve. We call it original sin. Yeah. I was taught that too. I think we need to be taught something else. I'll tell you why. Was that garden perfect?
No, paradise.
It was paradise. It's exactly what we were taught, right? Well, who was there already? How can it be paradise if the devil's there? I mean, really. I was always taught it was original sin. I was taught that Adam and Eve brought sin into the world. That we lived in a preternatural state. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Preternatural state, there it is. So when I was a young boy, I was a strange little kid. You can see that now. But I was a strange little kid. I wanted to be a priest since I was 8 years old. So I took all of this stuff seriously. And I'm like, so if Adam and Eve had not blown it, then I wouldn't have to go to school. I wouldn't have to ever get in trouble, right? We live in a place of perfect happiness according to the stories I was taught. And that sin came into the world through Adam and Eve. And I'm going, it's all their fault. But in reality, sin was already present in the person of the serpent. The Garden of Paradise was not perfect. Why is that important? Because this is my love. Because it helps us to look at things more clearly. Excuse me. We have what's called the doctrine of original sin. I got in serious trouble with a young Catholic school teacher a couple of years ago to do a workshop for teachers, Catholic school teachers out in East County. And one of the young ladies, or one of the teachers, young teachers, was teaching first grade. She said, well, how do you teach original sin to first graders? I said, I don't. She said, oh, wow. Why don't you? I said, because I don't believe in it. Well, it's a doctrine. How can you not believe in it? He was going to report me to the bishop. And I said, Let me explain it to you. And what I just said to you. I said, original sin says that we sin because of the fact that we were born into a world where our parents had sinned, and their parents had sinned, and their parents had sinned, all the way back to Adam and Eve. And I said, we do sin. But to tell me that a baby is born into this world with sin, it's impossible. And she says, what do you mean? I said, well, it's a teachable moment. What makes a sin a sin? There are 3 criteria. Oh, you know what's wrong? For not slow. Well, let me share with you how we do it with the kids. First, it has to be wrong. Objectively wrong. Second, you know it's wrong. Then third, you do it anyway. Can a baby do that? A baby doesn't know anything objectively wrong. The baby is not capable of knowing it, and a baby can't do it willingly. So how can that baby be cursed with sin?
By default.
By default. But you can't. You can only own sin yourself. Someone else cannot pass their sin on to you. But what they can pass on to you is their brokenness. So I said to the young lady, I said, not original sin, but original brokenness that leads to sin. Adam and Eve were born into a world that was already broken. The damage had already been done. And as a result of that, they were open to sin. Think of your lives. Think of how many sins you and I have committed because we were already damaged. Born into the families we were born into. Maybe our parents tried to do the best they could, but there were things that happened. I hear people talk about dysfunctional families. Show me a family that's not dysfunctional. Show me a family that's not dysfunctional, and I'll show you a person living by himself. And even that person is dysfunctional. In other words, we're all born into a broken world. And out of our brokenness, we sin. That's how I think we should look at that. And I did this. When Jesus, we look at the 4 Gospels. What does Jesus say more? Stop sinning or stop being afraid? Stop being afraid by a large amount of the times. Do not be afraid. If Jesus keeps saying do not be afraid a lot more than he says stop sinning, then what's the greater problem for you and me? Fear. Brokenness is our problem. And we have been taught to look at sin as our biggest problem. And while sin is real, our bigger problem is fear and our brokenness. And because we are broken, it makes it easier for us to sin. I cannot say that enough. God knows that. God didn't say to Adam and Eve, why did you sin? He said, who told you you were naked? Who told you you were broken? Who told you that? Adam and Eve came to know God that day. And even though they had blown it, even though the garden was no longer going to work for them, what did God do for them before they left? Does anybody recall? It's so beautiful, and it can be easily missed. At the end of the 3rd chapter. After all that they had done to God, what did God do before they left? Does anybody? He did something for them. What was the gift he gave them? Oh, they had that gift, that's why they sinned. The passage ends by saying, and God sewed clothing for them so they would not go into the world naked. That's who our God is. God sewed clothing for them so that they would not go into the world naked. Even after they had sinned and turned their backs on him,